Regionalism refers to cooperation between states within a specific geographical area, and the European Union is a key example where European states have integrated economically and politically to pursue shared interests. Regionalism is the process where states within a particular geographical area cooperate more closely on economic, political, or security matters to pursue shared interests. Regionalism has grown by increasing formal cooperation between neighboring states through regional organizations, treaties, and institutions responding to global economic and security pressures. This is shown by the creation of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership in 2020, where 15 Asia-Pacific countries formed the world's largest free trade agreement. The different forms of regionalism are economic regionalism, security regionalism, and political regionalism. Economic regionalism is cooperation between states to reduce trade barriers and integrate markets within a specific region. Economic regionalism has developed by the expansion of regional trade agreements such as the African Continental Free Trade Area, which began trading in 2021. Security regionalism is cooperation between states to address shared security threats through alliances and defense agreements. Security regionalism has developed by NATO strengthening collective defense following Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Political regionalism is the transfer or sharing of political authority and decision-making between states at a regional level. Political has developed by increased cooperation within the European Union on climate policy and sanctions policy during the 2020s. The relationship between regionalism and globalization is that regionalism can complement globalization by managing its effects through regional frameworks. This is shown by regional supply chain cooperation during the COVID-19 pandemic between 2020 and 2022 to manage global economic disruption. The prospects of political regionalism are moderate but uneven due to differing national interests and levels of political integration. This is shown by ongoing debates over deeper EU integration following the United Kingdom's withdrawal from the European Union in 2020. The prospects of regional governance are increasing as states seek collective solutions to transnational issues such as climate change and migration. This is shown by the European Union's coordinated response to the energy crisis following Russia's actions in Ukraine from 2022 onwards. The impact of regionalism on state sovereignty is that it can limit independent decision-making while enhancing collective influence. This is shown by EU member states being required to follow common trade and competition rules throughout the 2010s and 2020s. The debates that regionalism is beneficial are that it promotes economic growth, enhances security cooperation, and increases political influence on the global stage. This is shown by ASEAN states increasing economic resilience through regional trade cooperation during global trade tensions after 2018. The debates that regionalism is not beneficial are that it reduces sovereignty, creates unequal benefits between states, and can exclude non-members. This is shown by disagreements within the European Union over migration policy during the 2015 to 2023 period. Regionalism is significant as it shapes global trade patterns, influences security alliances, and provides regional solutions to global problems. This is shown by the growing importance of regional trade blocs like RCEP in global commerce since 2020. However, regionalism is not significant as global institutions remain influential, national interests often dominate, and regional cooperation can be fragmented. This is shown by the continued central role of the United Nations and the World Trade Organization in managing international crises during the 2020s. Regional organizations are formal institutions where states within the same geographical area cooperate to achieve shared economic, political, or security objectives. The North American Free Trade Association is a regional economic organization established to promote free trade between the United States, Canada, and Mexico. This has been developed by progressing through limited stages of economic integration rather than full political or economic union. The first stage of development is a free trade area where member states remove tariffs on most goods traded between them while keeping independent trade policies with non-members. The second stage of development is a deeper free trade framework where rules on investment, labor mobility, and dispute resolution were coordinated under the later USMCA agreement. The African Union is a regional political organization aiming to promote unity, peace, security, and development across the African continent. This has been developed by evolving from economic cooperation towards greater political and institutional integration. The first stage of development is a free trade area pursued through the African Continental Free Trade Area to reduce tariffs between African states. The second stage of development is movement towards a customs union where African states aim to coordinate external trade policies. The third stage of development is a proposed economic and political union where shared institutions are intended to manage continental governance. The Arab League is a regional political organization formed to promote cooperation and protect the sovereignty of Arab states. This has been developed by maintaining a loose structure that prioritizes state sovereignty over deep integration. The first stage of development is political cooperation where member states consult on shared regional issues without binding authority. The second stage of development is limited economic cooperation through agreements that encourage coordination rather than full integration. The Association of Southeast Asian Nations is a regional organization focused on economic growth, political stability and regional cooperation in Southeast Asia. This has been developed by gradually deepening economic and political cooperation while avoiding supranational control. The first stage of development is a free trade area established through the ASEAN Free Trade Area to reduce tariffs between members. The second stage of development is an emerging common market where there is increased movement of goods, services, and skilled labor across the region. The third stage of development is limited political cooperation where decisions are made through consensus rather than binding regional authority. European integration is the process where European states cooperate more closely by pooling sovereignty and developing shared institutions, laws, and policies to promote peace, stability, and economic cooperation across Europe. The factors that have fostered European integration are the desire to prevent conflict, economic cooperation, political cooperation, and global influence. The desire to prevent conflict means avoiding another major European war, which led to European integration by encouraging states to pool sovereignty after the Second World War to make war between members unlikely. Economic cooperation means states working together to increase trade and prosperity, which led to European integration by creating shared markets such as the European Coal and Steel Community. Political cooperation means governments coordinating policies and values, which led to European integration by encouraging joint decision-making on issues such as human rights and democracy. Global influence means increasing collective power on the world stage, which led to European integration by allowing European states to negotiate and act together internationally. The European Union was formed as a political and economic partnership to promote peace, stability, and cooperation between European states. The role of the European Union is to coordinate policy, create common laws, and manage shared areas such as trade, competition, and the single market. The objectives of the European Union are to promote peace, economic growth, social progress, free movement, and respect for fundamental rights. The European Union was developed by gradual integration through treaties agreed by member states. The first stage of development was the European Coal and Steel Community, which integrated key industries to reduce the risk of war. The second stage of development was the European Economic Community, which created a common market to encourage free trade and economic growth. The third stage of development was the European Union, which expanded cooperation into political, social, and monetary areas. The key institutions of the European Union are the European Commission, the European Parliament, the Council of the European Union, the European Council, and the Court of Justice of the European Union. The European Commission was established by the founding treaties and has the power to propose legislation, enforce EU law, and represent the EU internationally. The European Parliament was established to represent EU citizens and has the power to amend, approve, and reject EU legislation and budgets. The Council of the European Union was established to represent member state governments and has the power to negotiate and pass laws with the European Parliament. The European Council was established to provide political direction and sets the overall priorities of the European Union. The Court of Justice of the European Union was established to ensure EU law is applied equally and has the power to interpret treaties and rule against member states. The process of enlargement is the method where new countries join the European Union after meeting strict political and economic criteria. This affects the European Union as it increases its size, diversity, and global influence while also creating challenges for decision-making. The key treaties and agreements of the European Union are the Treaty of Rome, the Maastricht Treaty, the Lisbon Treaty, and the Schengen Agreement. The Treaty of Rome is the founding treaty signed in 1957 that created the European Economic Community and established a common market to allow free movement of goods, services, capital, and labor between member states. The Maastricht Treaty is the 1992 treaty that formally created the European Union and expanded integration by introducing European citizenship, increasing cooperation in foreign and security policy, and setting out plans for the economic and monetary union. The Lisbon Treaty is the 2007 treaty that reformed the structure of the European Union by strengthening the powers of the European Parliament, creating a permanent president of the European Council, and improving decision-making efficiency. The Schengen Agreement is an agreement that removed internal border controls between participating European states, allowing people to travel freely without passport checks across much of Europe. The Economic and Monetary Union is the framework where EU states coordinate economic policy and many share a single currency, the euro. Supranationalism is where decision-making power is shared with independent EU institutions rather than being controlled solely by member states. Supranational approaches are used by the EU as policy is made above the national level, which is shown by the European Commission enforcing competition fines on major technology companies such as Google in the last decade. The debates that supranational approaches are effective are that they ensure consistent laws, prevent domination by powerful states, and allow swift collective action. This is shown by the EU vaccine procurement program during the COVID-19 pandemic, where the European Commission negotiated on behalf of all member states. However, the debates that supranational approaches are not effective are that they reduce national sovereignty, create democratic deficits, and are slow and bureaucratic. This is shown by criticism of EU decision-making during the early stages of the COVID-19 response, where some states felt constrained by central coordination. Intergovernmentalism is where power remains primarily with member states and decisions are made through negotiation between governments. Intergovernmental approaches are used by the EU as states retain control over sensitive areas, which is shown in EU foreign policy decisions requiring unanimous agreement. The debate that intergovernmental approaches are effective are that they protect sovereignty, increase democratic legitimacy, and allow flexibility for national interests. This is shown by coordinated EU sanctions on Russia after the invasion of Ukraine, where member states agreed measures through collective negotiation. However, the debate that intergovernmental approaches are not effective are that they lead to slow decision-making, watered-down policies, and deadlock. This is shown by delays and disagreements between member states over migration policy reform within the last decade. An international body is an organization created by states to facilitate cooperation between them, whereas a global actor is an entity able to independently influence outcomes in global politics. The European Union is significant as an international body as it provides a forum for cooperation, creates binding rules for members, and coordinates collective responses to shared challenges. This is shown by the European Union coordinating collective sanctions against Russia following the invasion of Ukraine in 2022. However, the European Union is not significant as an international body as internal divisions weaken unity, decision-making can be slow, and national governments retain key powers. This is shown by disagreements between member states over migration policy during the refugee pressures of the late 2010s and early 2020s. The European Union is significant as a global actor as it has major economic power, regulatory influence, and diplomatic reach. This is shown by the European Union shaping global digital regulation through the implementation of the General Data Protection Regulation from 2018 onwards. However, the European Union is not significant as a global actor as it lacks a unified foreign policy, has limited military capacity, and is constrained by competing national interests. This is shown by differing EU member state responses to the Israel-Gaza conflict since 2023. The constraints and obstacles that affect the European Union's political influence in global politics are the requirement for consensus, national sovereignty concerns, and divergent foreign policy priorities. This is shown by delays and compromises in agreeing common foreign policy positions on China during the 2020s. The constraints and obstacles that affect the European Union's economic influence in global politics are uneven economic performance, reliance on external energy supplies, and global competition. This is shown by the impact of the 2022 energy crisis on EU economies following reduced gas supplies from Russia. The constraints and obstacles that affect the European Union's structural influence in global politics are institutional complexity, democratic legitimacy concerns, and limited enforcement capacity beyond its borders. This is shown by challenges in forcing EU environmental standards on external trading partners during negotiations in the early 2020s. The constraints and obstacles that affect the European Union's military influence in global politics are limited defense integration, dependence on NATO, and uneven military spending among members. This is shown by the European Union relying heavily on NATO rather than independent military action in response to the war in Ukraine since 2022. Regionalism addresses and resolves global issues involving conflict by encouraging cooperation between neighboring states through mediation, peacekeeping, and collective security arrangements. This is shown by the African Union supporting peacekeeping and mediation efforts in Ethiopia during the Tigray conflict from 2020 onwards. Regionalism addresses and resolves global issues involving conflict to a greater extent as regional organizations often have better local knowledge and legitimacy than global institutions. This is shown by ECOWAS mediating political crises and attempting conflict resolution following military coups in Mali and Niger between 2020 and 2023. Regionalism addresses and resolves global issues involving conflict to a lesser extent as regional organizations frequently lack enforcement power and are constrained by member state interests. This is shown by the Arab League's limited ability to end the Syrian conflict despite continued engagement during the 2010s and 2020s. Regionalism addresses and resolves global issues involving poverty by promoting regional trade, development funds, and economic cooperation to support growth. This is shown by the European Union providing large-scale development funding to Eastern and Southern European regions through cohesion policy since 2015. Regionalism addresses and resolves global issues involving poverty to a greater extent as coordinated regional development reduces inequality and encourages sustainable growth. This is shown by the African Continental Free Trade Area beginning implementation in 2021 to boost intra-African trade and economic development. Regionalism addresses and resolves global issues involving poverty to a lesser extent as economic benefits are often unevenly distributed between member states. This is shown by persistent economic disparities between southern and northern EU member states following the Eurozone crisis during the late 2010s. Regionalism addresses and resolves global issues involving human rights by setting regional standards and monitoring state compliance. This is shown by the European Union imposing sanctions on Belarusian officials over human rights abuses since 2020. Regionalism addresses and resolves global issues involving human rights to a greater extent as regional courts and agreements can directly influence member state behavior. This is shown by rulings of the European Court of Human Rights continuing to shape national laws across Europe during the 2010s and 2020s. Regionalism addresses and resolves global issues involving human rights to a lesser extent as enforcement mechanisms are weak and states may ignore rulings. This is shown by continued human rights concerns in Hungary and Poland despite EU pressure since 2018. Regionalism addresses and resolves global issues involving military influence by forming collective defense alliances that deter aggression. This is shown by NATO strengthening its eastern presence following Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Regionalism addresses and resolves global issues involving military influence to a greater extent as collective security increases deterrence and burden sharing. This is shown by Finland and Sweden seeking NATO membership in response to regional security threats in 2022 and 2023. Regionalism addresses and resolves global issues involving military influence to a lesser extent as regional alliances can escalate tensions and exclude non-members. This is shown by increased geopolitical tensions between NATO and Russia since 2022. Thank you for watching that video on regionalism and the EU. I'll see you in the next one.